Welcome to the Recruitment Founders Podcast, the place to kickstart your journey to running a successful recruitment business. In each episode, you'll get knowledge, tips, and real-life stories to help you take your business from startup to whatever you want it to be. At Recruitment Founders Club, we'll show you how to follow a proven path to success, tap into a network of top-notch mentors, and join a community that thrives on collaboration and shared wins. You run the business, and we make sure you succeed.
So, another episode of RFC Podcast.
Yeah.
Talking about founder hard lessons and what we sort of wish we knew earlier. Yeah. I think we'll come at this probably from a few angles today. We'll talk about it from our own experience of founding our respective businesses.
Yeah. And we've chosen this one because we've set our own business up, having not done it before.
Yeah.
We've set RFC up as a new startup. Within that, we've experienced and been part of other people setting up their business for the first time. These are all first-time events, aren't they?
Yeah.
And everybody goes into that with an expectation, and often what's on the other side of that is very different to what we were expecting and those people were expecting. So I think we've got, we're not experts in this subject, but we've got a fair bit of experience.
We have, and there's no blueprint that you can follow to a T that says, right, follow this blueprint and you'll be a super successful entrepreneur, despite what some of the links that you can click on Instagram and LinkedIn and whatnot say. There's no magic recipe, but I think there are a few things that we've learned, either directly or indirectly, the hard way that we can share.
Yeah.
I think we both feel that the market's a really interesting point at the minute, because I think a lot of people talk about it negatively, but we've shared this. The best billers always find a way to bill in any market. There's opportunity out there at the minute, and I think
that's never changed throughout.
And I don't think it will. And
financial crash 08, 09.
I don't think it will.
COVID, pandemic.
And we've heard, AI is going to eradicate recruitment, external recruitment. I don't think it will. It'll be which recruiters.
Get rid of the generalists.
Which recruiters
and
use
supercharge
AI,
the best recruiters on it.
Which so there's all of that to talk about. But I think at the core of this, most recruiters don't fail because they're not good enough. They just don't learn the right lessons quick enough. That's my honest opinion on that. And we're going to sort of unpack a few of our mistakes and a few of our lessons, and also a few of the things we've seen other people learn today. So I think just looking at things from the out, one of the things that jumps off the page for me is, I think founders, first and foremost, founders that start new companies in markets they're unfamiliar with, that is that's a really hard lesson, isn't it? What are your experiences in and around that sort of arena?
My lessons were extreme on that front.
Yeah.
Because when I set Hannison Green up, I hadn't worked medtech before. I certainly didn't know what neuromodulation was. I'd never worked the US. Hadn't done a deal for 10 years plus. I'd never set a business up before. So even just thinking about this topic, I was so naive about everything.
Yeah.
I just thought, my attitude on a lot of stuff, right? It'll be all right.
Yeah.
It'll be all right.
It'll be all right.
I'll set this business up. Got, happy with my logo, name of the company, website was all right. I mean, it's been changed since then. Off I go. I'm going to just go and do some deals. And there's just so much that I just underestimated when it came to that. The biggest one for me, I think we've got a bit of a brief here, but some of the things we're going to talk about, the biggest one for me was loneliness. I backed myself to do deals again. And I backed myself to do deals in a new market. And there was no ego with that. I just believed I could do it. And part of it was I had to do it. Sometimes when you've just got to make something work, when you've got a 6-month runway, and I've got a wife, I've got kids, I've got a big mortgage, and I'm just like, if I don't do something, we're going to be out of money in 6 months, and I'm going to be in a really tricky position. That alone, for me, was kind of enough to kind of get me up out of bed each day, motivated and doing the job. And I just backed myself to do deals because the way I was going to go about recruitment wasn't the traditional way of just volume, hope something sticks.
Yeah.
So I'm in my mid-40s now. I know how to engage with people. I know how to build relationships. I think if I genuinely try, spoke about this earlier today on another pod that we recorded, if you aim to help people and go over and above the call of duty to do that rather than focusing on your own agenda, surely that's got to get some results. The biggest thing for me that I underestimated, that I wish I'd have known earlier, was the loneliness element of it.
Okay.
Of being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And being a business owner. When all that noise disappears of, you hit send on your first LinkedIn post, it's the main channel that everybody's on, and you put off just launching my own business. Spoke about this on previous pods, right? Yeah. And then you get everybody coming out of the woodwork, people you've known throughout all of your career. They come out, you haven't spoken to them for 20 years, they're all saying you're going to smash it, you're going to do this, you're going to do that, and you feel incredible. That lasts for about a week, and then it literally just plummets off a cliff, and then it's just you and four walls.
Yeah.
And you and I certainly, you and I previously in our employed careers, we were used to having people around us, weren't we? And I really underestimated the impact of that on my mental well-being.
Yeah. And I think I look back at it now, and I think we stumbled into a routine that helped us both.
Yeah.
Back then, because I think I launched my business about a year, almost.
Yeah, it's pretty much bang on a year before.
A year before yours. And we found ourselves in the middle of lockdown, pretty sharpish. And we were just going for a pint or going for a walk or take the bikes out in the park and stuff like that.
Yeah, little things, but they matter,
and we talked shop, naturally. And I think we sort of stumbled upon that quite quickly. So I think that's a really good. I think that's a really good lesson. That loneliness, it's real.
And who have you got around you in those moments? Who have you got? Yeah. Because your family's one thing, but you don't really want to burden your family with
They also don't know the answers as well.
They don't know the
most
answers.
of the time. I mean, unless if you start in your own business and your mum, your dad, brother, sister, whoever significant other has started their own recruitment business, then great.
Yeah. So with all due respect, they're not relevant, are they?
Correct.
And then you look at the rest of your support network, and it's other recruiters, it's other managers that are employed in recruitment. Yeah. These people haven't set their own business up.
Go and speak to your mate who's still employed, who's got a mature business brand around them, who's hitting their business, targets, and telling you that the market's all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're in your own company that's 2 months old.
Yeah.
All the buzz of the original posters wore off.
Yeah.
Nobody you're sending emails to or messages to is responding back to you.
Yeah.
You ain't got any good candidates. You ain't got any meetings in the diary. You're living a very different life.
Yeah.
And I think that's...
Well, we were quite fortunate there then, like you said, that we were living on the same road. Yeah. Your business was a year old. So you had some footprint there and some history and some experience that I could kind of take from, and we bounced stuff off each other. But
and I'd probably got another I'd been MD of a small business previous to that for a good few years. I'd probably had 10 years of my career where I was used to picking up the phone to people that have no idea who I work for.
Yeah.
Whereas you were transitioning in that stage of your career where it was the first time you hadn't got a big brand behind you that people are unfamiliar with.
Yeah.
It was the first time that you're in a market where nobody knows who Lindsay Hartland is. And, I think that's it's a really good first lesson is if you're going to do this on your own.
Have a look at who you got around.
Who's around you and what's your support network, and don't just say, I've got a couple of mates who are in recruitment. My mum and dad will support me, or my significant other is there supportive. Those people aren't the right people. They're not the right people because your family's going to tell you.
Who do you know runs their own business? Who do you know who's started their own business?
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be recruitment.
Yeah, but I would say though, it has to be a service business. And the reason I say that, I never forget this conversation. He might listen to this podcast, so I won't name him. But a friend of mine from uni went on to go and work for one of the big IT, manufacturing businesses in the world. Okay. Had a great career and went on to, I think he's a sales director now for half the world. And he was selling at this one point, like telephones, PCs, hardware, big hardware kits with a software bolt on. And we were a bit, we'd had a few drinks the one day and we were having a debate and he was saying to me about how easy recruitment is. Okay. Easy to make money because we don't have to work very hard. It's a massive fee. And and it was probably like one of what I feel it was one of my more inspirational, quick-witted responses because I said to him, I said, well, I disagree with you completely. I said, how many phone systems have you sold to a client that the week before they get installed, they ring you up and tell you they don't want to go there anymore?
Yeah.
What do you mean? I said, well, I could work for 4 months on a deal that you're saying, yeah, okay, it's 35 grand deal and work out my hourly rate and you're saying I'm on footballers' wages, that's your view. But the week before that deal goes in, that person has a family event, gets a counter offer, whatever, and then turns around to me and says, look, I'm not starting. That you're not in that world.
Yeah.
So the why I'm bringing that up, that's why who you've got around is really relevant.
Yeah.
Because mum and dad that just want to see you do great, your partner who's in a different industry, or your mate who set up his own business doing packaging, right? There's some threads you can pull on, absolutely, because those people are no doubt educated, got your best intentions in mind and all that. I'm not suggesting they're not relevant, but they're not fully relevant and they're not the people that you want to put around you.
So and if you are thinking of setting up your own recruitment business, the chances are you will know somebody, won't you?
Yeah.
Who's done it in the last 5 years.
And get around them. And that doesn't have to be we're not...
They've got to be great mates, have you?
And we're not building it up for a shameless plug on RFC here. It doesn't have to be an RFC type organisation, but you've got to make sure you've got somebody around you that gets it.
Because you can't just do it all on your own, can you? You can, but it's going to be far more stressful than you want to be taking on in terms of those levels of stress. If you've got no sounding board, you've got nobody to hold the mirror up to, you've got nobody to challenge you on some of your decision making, nobody to celebrate the wins, that understands recruitment, or help pick you up when you do have a dropout or a counter offer comes in or something like that. Can't underestimate how valuable those relations are at that point. Yeah. And it's not just about somebody who's got that experience, about somebody who actually has got that sort of duty of care. They're good people. They want, if they give you advice or they give you an opinion or they listen to you and offer some sort of level of support, it's coming from a good place as well. That they've got no agenda. Yeah. That they genuinely care about you being successful and being happy.
And we've always tried to do that. And ironically, with people involved in the club, we obviously have got an invested interest. But I think the best way to be a mentor in that space is to be as objective as possible. Yeah. And I always try and pride myself on that. And I'd like to think anybody that has ever been involved in business with you or I, formally or informally, knows that they're getting feedback and that is objective, that is meant in the right way, and I think that's really, really important. I think the next big one for me would be deciding what you're to be known for, and subsequently off the back of that, learning to say no. What I mean by that is when you start your own business. So let's carry on that. That theme that we're on there. So you start your own business, you put out the message on LinkedIn about I've started my new business. And everybody goes, get a massive dopamine hit. Falls down. You've then got a friend. Let's say you've got a friend or a mentor that you're working with or a business partner. You've now got good people around you. The easy thing to do next is to lose focus on your niche. Yeah. To be less targeted and start saying yes to things that you shouldn't say yes to. Yeah. And over time,
because you want that first job, you want the
first deal. And we've seen this in RFC as well, right? Yeah. With certain founders, and I've also found myself doing it myself at times. Yeah. I did it. And this is why this pod's not for us to sit on a high horse. So only last year we were quiet in the summer, and I had a client offer us a retainer on a project that from the off, I really felt the job was unfillable.
Yeah.
And everything about it, it wasn't that it was difficult, because I've built my career on filling niche roles. It just didn't feel right. But we were quiet, and I got bills to pay, salaries to pay, and we took this project on. And when I actually early this year went back and looked at that project, and I looked at how many hours we'd invested in the project for the return on it, we'd spent nearly 50% more on resource trying to complete the project than we did completing the project. And they're the sorts of things where,
so if you had have invested that time elsewhere,
and if I was a startup really early on,
yeah,
where I hadn't got a bit of a war chest saved up and a client base that could get me through that,
yeah,
that could have been a terminal decision for the business.
Yeah.
I said yes to something that I knew I shouldn't have said yes to.
Yeah.
But I felt like I had to say yes to it.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this, you know.
And it is hard to say no in those situations.
Well, you've given me a little bit of a, I forget, there's a little word for a little quote. I remember you saying, when you can't see a deal, you can't see the deal.
Yeah.
Right. It's a really,
it doesn't matter how experienced you are. If you can't see it, you can't see it.
And a lot of recruiters are strikers that get used to putting the ball in the net at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And when you're on a goal drought, it's difficult. But I think that's a really important lesson for me, is what are you going to be known for? And then have that real targeted, focused niche, if you want to call it that. Mm. And you're able then, and you should be able to look outside of that. So you've got parameters that you can flex between.
Yeah.
But outside of that, you're not going to do it. And even better, which is a real big bit of advice that I would give, which is about how you maintain a network and promote your brand as a startup. Think about, right, that's going to be my absolute niche. There's going to be my parameters for broadening myself out. Beyond that, this is what it could look like, and what's my network for then referring people into that space.
Yeah.
Right. So I know different recruitment companies. I know some business coaches, and I know some HR consultants that sit around my market but are not in my niche. And what I've found, this is a lesson for those listeners out there that's taken me best part of 20 years to learn, right? But I've got that network now, so that when I get a requirement that comes in, most of the time, if it's outside of our core, and the core plus flex, as I call it, I can say to that client, that's not for me, but go and speak to these.
Yeah.
Or if I've got a candidate that calls me that's, I've been recommended to speak to you and by this person, and can you help me? I'm looking for a job. Well, no, but why don't you speak to these people? And what that does is it gives them a positive memory of you, and you will not almost certainly get any fruit off that tree at that moment in time. Yeah. But I tell you what, you definitely won't get any fruit off that tree if you turn around and say to them, yes, I can help you. Like candidate, yeah, nice conversation, blah, 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 pleasant. I'll keep your CV on file and never, ever speak to them again, because they'll just put you in the bin. They'll never come back to you, right? That candidate in 5 years, 8 years might be a senior leader in your niche, because they're kind of within your line of sight. They might climb up the ladder and be somebody that's important in your network.
Yeah.
If you've referred them on to another recruiter or somebody else, right, they're going to remember you positively. There's no guarantee, right, you're going to get work from them. But I can tell you this, in 6 months' time, you might have a lead in this area of the market that they're in. You can call them and say, oh, hi, can you remember when I recommended you speak to Jocks? Oh, yeah, I do, yeah, you weren't quite, yeah. I've got a favour for you. Can you help me with this? Mm. And that's something that stems out of knowing your lane and knowing your niche. And I can't recommend that enough, is don't think you've got to say yes to everything. Know where to say no, and then build your business as a business owner. Start to think about things as a businessman or woman rather than as a recruiter. Because a recruiter, right, is in an office being told, make me money on that vertical or make me money on that market. Anything that's not in that market they don't care about. Right? That's how they're wired to be. And I get it because I've been that and I've managed people that way, right? When you own a small business, you have to think. We've talked about my views on networking before, Rob, but you have to think like a network.
Yeah.
You have to think broader. You have to think like a business person. And that's what I'm saying. Know where to say no, but try and define those boundaries a little bit and think about, well, if it's a no here or it's a no there or a no over there, who do I know that I could refer? Build those relationships.
Yeah.
And I know you've got that, and you've started another startup out the back of that, right? Through having a good network. But that's something that I would really encourage founders in their early phase to think about. What am I going to be known for? How can I soften that around the edges to broaden my opportunities? And then beyond that, who do I know that I can refer people onto? How do I be a conduit in my market space? Because when I'm going to go and do a selfless act, I'll probably get one back. So, and I feel like I've just gone on an absolute rant about that, but it's something I'm really, really passionate about. And I think it's a stumbling block a lot of founders fall over.
Yeah, because where does it stop? If you go in, if you say yes to everything that comes in, where does that end?
Yeah.
And ultimately, what journey does that take you on? Because we're already seeing that the generalist recruiter is disappearing,
and they will die.
We've had a lot of lessons along the way about market changes, and I was fortunate. I had a good work ethic, and I believed in myself. But if I had my time again, whether I would do that, I don't know. I feel incredibly fortunate to have found neuromodulation.
Yeah.
And the thing is, for me, I didn't have a market anyway. I didn't have a market because I was managing 3 managers.
Yeah.
I hadn't recruited for 10, 12, 13 years. So actually, me starting in medtech wasn't really much of a big deal. It wasn't like I was leaving a well-nurtured market behind. But, a lesson that we've learned throughout bringing people through on Recruitment Founders Club and our own experiences, moving markets is just an incredibly risky thing, isn't it?
It's an incredibly risky thing, and as I say, I struggle to articulate it, but in my mind it makes total sense. People underestimate how maybe is a provocative short clip. Most recruiters think they're better than they are. And they think that by being a good recruiter, they're a good business person.
Yeah.
Those two things are not linked.
Yeah, very different.
They're very different.
Yeah.
So you can be, and I was that person, right?
Yeah. You
can be a very high, consistent biller.
Yeah.
And then be a fish out of water as a business person.
Yeah.
And most recruiters listening to this, I hope this triggers them because it's real. And what I mean by it is, you've got your desk, you're used to billing, you're known in it. Take you out of that environment. You think, well, all my recruitment business is just me billing elsewhere.
Yeah.
Surprise, surprise. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not. And they'll think, well, I negotiate client terms with my clients. That'll be easy. Well, great, but you can't just lift your market and plonk it in a new shell. It won't happen. I've not seen it done yet. Okay, and those that have done it, at the risk of being taken to court for extremely large amounts of money that I would never recommend doing. So, becoming a successful business owner from being a previously successful biller isn't a simple step. Being a business owner is more about how you network, how you build an offer into a client. You've got to have a value proposition.
How you create a brand.
how you create a brand, what are you known for, what is your niche. All of these sorts of things sort of filter into this to make being a standalone entity, even if you're a solopreneur recruitment business, it is much more complex than just billing in an existing framework. Even if you've started a cold desk.
A lot of people underestimate that, don't they?
Yeah, they do. And it's really hard to sort of, what's the word I'm looking for, to frame it in a really pithy, tangible sort of paragraph for someone. But it's being a business owner and being a high performing biller are not the same thing. And we've now got enough data points through RFC. We've got enough data points for ourselves and our other friends outside of that RFC network to see that. So firstly,
But equally, what will really help you on that? We don't want to paint a picture here that it's just this ridiculously different world that's infinitely more complex and difficult. What we're trying to say is it's not the same thing. You should have your eyes wide open.
And people can do it because we've done it and we're not overly special.
But what you're saying is what's going to help you make that transition is if you've got a niche, if you've got a well-nurtured network, if you've got a voice and a brand.
And you've got to think about it like a business rather than just assuming, well, I've been a consistent biller, I'll be all right. It's not the same job. It's the same job plus 40%, 50% doing stuff that you've not done before. So you have to define your boundaries. You have to think about, right, here's my niche, here's the outer boundary. What's my network look like? Because you're not naturally in an ecosystem like you were when you were employed. You've got to create that ecosystem for yourself. And that's something that you should think about. The next one for me falls out the back of that is that the pricing and the confidence piece. I see so many startups that underprice too early. They and for various reasons, they might have a quiet 3 or 4 months. Then we start going into panic. We'll pick up any work at a low price. The snowball's left the top of the mountain now, right? And by the time it gets to the bottom, it's going to crash and be huge. You have now just single-handedly put your business on a path to it never being the business you dreamt of it being. You've got to have standards and you've got to know how to propose value. And I think that's something a lot of recruiters struggle with is how to pitch their value. Frankly, if you're out there selling people for a percentage and that's basically your outlook, well, then that's how you're going to negotiate with a client. And that's very easy for a client to push you down on price. If you're out there...
And once you start on that road, it's a slippery slope,
It's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
If you're out there, attributing value to the time, effort that it's taken you to curate a network of people that can solve a client's problem, you're in control of negotiation. And that's the way I look at it, right? If I'm out there charging 25 to 30% to clients on a predominantly retained basis, almost exclusively retained basis, they're paying for my time, they're paying for my expertise, and they're engaging me and my network that I've curated over time. That's got a value. Just in the same way when they engage their law firm, their accountants, etc., it's got a value. If you approach it that the only conduit between you and making money from that client is a CV, well, then you're just commodity selling, and they can put a price on that, and that's very hard for you to back out of. So for me, this is another big lesson that I really encourage both active recruiters in larger businesses and budding entrepreneurs to think about is, what is your approach to negotiating? What are you charging for? Really distill that. What are you charging for? And it
goes back to not being afraid to say no as well. Where do you put the stake in the sand when it does come to negotiation? What are you genuinely prepared to walk away from? And are you prepared to walk away from that? Will you walk away from that? Because it's okay saying it. It's that strength of conviction, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because everybody can say, "Oh, these are my terms, and these are the boundaries of my market." A lesson I'll bolt onto that just to kind of give it a bit more context, is you've got to have that strength of conviction. Yeah. You've got to, everything that we're talking about here is strength of conviction, isn't it? It's what's my market, what's my niche, where do I go to and where do I not go out to? Where do I draw the line on terms?
Yeah. And everybody's got a different style, right? So some people might want to appear, they don't want to appear that they're a one-person band, right? Yeah. And they'll look at different ways to dress it. Other people will be really uber confident, which was my take on, at that time, I'm a solopreneur, I'm an independent service provider, and this is my value. You've got to find your own feet there, right? But I would recommend investing time in finding out what that is.
Yeah,
it's a bit like back in the day, doing all the sales call practices. You do that for a reason, so that when you're in that environment, you know what to do. Any sports person, that's what they're doing on the training ground.
Yeah.
Whereas it's funny, people launch their own business and they don't actually think about, right, how am I going to negotiate if a client puts it on my toes?
Yeah.
How do I sell myself? How do I sell the business? How do I defend the terms? And where's my walk away point?
Yeah.
And we've had some crunchy decisions with a couple of our founders, right, around this, who do feel, I need to take that deal. Well, yeah.
Well, look, let's finish on this, right? Because I think we do need to wrap up. We could talk about this all day long. Let's finish on this, because I think everything comes back to one of the original points that we made, and it's having good people around you.
Yeah.
It's not a plug and RFC. It doesn't need to be a partner or an investor. It's having people around you that have been, because you're still going to go through those lessons. Everything's going to be brand new to you. You're going to be lifting your billion into a new business, but then you're going to be a business owner. You've got to do finances. You've got to do operations. You've got to do marketing. You've got to do everything as well as being a biller. So and the learning curve's amazing.
Yeah.
But having people that have been there and done that and had those lessons themselves and do want to give you objective advice, that everything comes back to that. Because you've got to have those sounding boards, haven't you? You've got to have, when you do, you might have strength of conviction on your terms, but you still might question yourself.
Yeah.
That's when you pick up your mate or somebody you know and go, right, this is where I'm at with the terms. Should I do this? I said I wouldn't, but should I do it? And then all it takes is for them to say, well, and remind you of why you're doing it, what you got in it for, what their experiences are in that area.
Yeah, and my final point that I'd like to cover just before we wrap the pod is on sort of founder hard lessons is don't try and grow too quickly.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people. I mean, it comes from the way I think we're largely bred in recruitment, right? The old headcount vanity.
Bigger the team, bigger the success.
Yeah. And it's a load of nonsense. And we, on our previous pods, when we had Mike Ames coming in and talking about high profit lifestyle businesses, I think that is largely where the future is. There'll be the odd one that scales and sells, but a lot of these people that are coming out of and launching their own business, or even people that have had their own business now 2 or 3 years, they haven't really tasted the success of that. And I would really encourage them to put themselves first. So what are your goals and objectives? Okay.
Yeah.
Because most people's goals and objectives aren't to have 10 people or 20 people work for them. And even if they say they are, my question to that will be why. And actually then you start to find out it's well, if I've got 10 people, I'll be earning this, I'll be able to buy that, or I'd have this security, or I'll be able to. So don't grow too quickly. You've got to, and it's twofold. Firstly, you've got to taste some success from your business. It's a really hard road. It can be so worthwhile, but don't be too quick to just try and grow and scale. If that
just because you've had a decent first year.
Yes. Yeah. And secondly, really reflect on less about your own goals, but really reflect on the environment you're bringing people into. So, and I've made this mistake myself. So, are you a good biller that started to make money in your own business? And that's then masking over how ready you are to make that accessible to somebody else. Yeah. So, have you got accounts that you can give to people?
Have you got client infrastructure?
Have you got client infrastructure that somebody can land in? Or have you just got money in the bank that enables you to hire someone?
Yeah.
Right. And what I mean by this
things
is
can very quickly turn, can't they?
Yeah, because if you as I made this mistake myself, if you've got money in the bank and you've built well and you've got your business off the ground, and you think, right, it's time now to go and recruit someone else. But actually what you're then doing is you're recruiting another you, because you've not got clients to give them. You've not really got a brand to give them. So you're just recruiting somebody else to come in and be like a co-founder in another half of the startup.
Yeah.
So, and if that person, which they often are, is a recruiter who's got 3 to 5 years recruitment experience, take a step back and think, if I was investing in this person, would I give them 35, 50 grand to go and set up on their own? And that's
essentially what you're doing.
That's essentially what you do.
Yeah.
You're putting them next to a founder, solopreneur, solid biller, who's got some money in the bank, who now thinks they're ready for growth because they've got money in the bank.
Yeah.
But actually what you're giving them is a cold desk in a relatively stone cold business next to somebody who's making a few quid.
Yeah.
So would you back them with 35 to 50 grand investment set up on their own? The answer is almost certainly going to be no.
Good way of looking at it.
So that to me is a really big piece of advice. And I've spent a lot of my own money making that mistake. And I made that mistake several times until I realised what the issue was. The issue was, well, I thought I was a businessman. I thought I'd got a business. No, I'd managed to take the billing Greg into a new company that Greg happens to own now. And I'm now setting somebody up next to me who's not a founder capable. They're not an entrepreneur. They're a recruiter. And that's back to that point. There is a difference. So when you're building out your team, you've got to think about how ready are you to grow? And you could genuinely have 200 or 300K in the bank and think, right, I've got to now grow. But you could do that by billing massive sums yourself, and you've got no client infrastructure to give them.
Yeah.
You've got no bandwidth to lead them and coach them. That's the bit that will be difficult, that transition from, right, it's just me, how do I grow? Well, some people could actually be billing way less than that figure, have less money in the bank, but they've got clients that have got broad agreements with that are growth ready. So that's the bit that's important. That's when you know you're ready for growth is, I've got client infrastructure to give them. I've got client infrastructure to plug them in. Yeah. Because otherwise, all you're doing is just retaining yourself as a biller and setting them up for failure. So that would be my final lesson that I wish I'd have known.
Great advice, Mr. Elton. Hopefully that's useful to some of our listeners.
Hopefully, and it's been hopefully it's been an impactful episode today. And
catch you on the next one.
See you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Recruitment Founders Podcast. Make sure you subscribe on your favourite podcast platform or YouTube so you never miss an episode. Connect with us on LinkedIn to join our community of founders and mentors, or visit our website to learn more about how we can help you launch, grow, and thrive in your recruitment business.